Hi there, this is Chandra Easton from Star Astrology Healing, Living in Light. I'm continuing on with the series of talks entitled 2020, the Year of Decision, where I've been focusing upon the spiritual tests of the individual zodiacal signs. This talk is about the tests associated with the sign of Leo. Yes, Leo is one of the, it's a heralding sign astrologically, and from the esoteric perspective, Leo indicates that the soul is making its presence felt in the world. The preparatory signs of Aries and Taurus and Gemini and Cancer having been moved through sequentially, and sometimes we move through those in an individual lifetime or over a series of lifetimes, but we eventually arrive at the portal of the sign of Leo. And the goal for those individuals, it could be the sun in Leo, could be the moon in Leo, could be Leo rising, could be some of your progress planets in Leo, is to birth the Christ consciousness, that's the light of your soul, within the cave of your heart chakra. The sign of Leo is very strongly connected with the first major expansion of soul awareness on the spiritual path. So we have to go through lives of spiritual aspirancy until eventually we have a stupendous breakthrough. That breakthrough is known as the first initiation. This is the initiation that the soul undertakes on the inner levels. It has nothing to do with a workshop that you've attended or initiation that someone's given you in any particular external worldly ceremony. I'm speaking here about the soul's initiation. And what happens with the first, and there are 9 initiations, and this is the first of the 9 initiations. That is always taken when there is prominence of the sign Leo in the natal chart. And what happens is that we make contact. The lower mind and the soul connect, and therefore the process of infusement of the soul, and what we mean by infusement is that the soul begins to overshadow and enter into and infuse, and gradually, by the time we get to the 5th initiation, that's some lifetimes down the track, overtake the personal self. So you could say that this is a soul who is young in the terms of light and illumination, but has taken a long time, or an old soul, many, many lifetimes upon the moving through the wheels, as we refer to them, the wheels of karma, to get to this point. How do we recognise that the individual who has Leo strong is approaching this first great initiation? Well, they become sensitive to the worlds around them, the visible and the invisible. They become aware of themselves as a personality, but also an aspirational soul. They become mystically oriented and occultly developed, tuned in, basically, in the modern lingo. At the first initiation, the doors to the realm of spirit open, and light is seen and understood in the capacity. It's as if we see and understand light through the eyes of our soul. So what are the tasks associated with the sign of Leo? Well, primarily it's about creating a sense of order and organisation, having a structure from which our soul can work. One of the ways to create this order and this structure is service to others. Finding a cause, doesn't matter what the cause is. It could be environmental awareness, it could be the studying of science, it could be studying of mathematics, it could be the studying of something occult or mystical, but a dedication to a cause that will ultimately bring about benefit for others. That's the key point here, is that the benefit is not for the self, the benefit is for others. It's about establishing a right relationship between us and the other humans, and being creative in our lives. Physical discipline is incredibly important. Without physical discipline, Our soul cannot take control of the instrument, that is our mind and ultimately our emotions and our body. So really, an individual whose soul is approaching the first initiation, who has Leo strong somewhere in their natal or their progress chart, has recognised that the inner worlds are potent. The Leo energy means that somewhere in the ray makeup, we have the seventh ray. The seventh ray is a frequency of light known as the violet frequency that creates order in our lives, and generally speaking, we function well with order and with ceremony and with ritual and with the use of meditational practices, what is in the old language known as the white magic. So either the personal self or the mental body are influenced by this seventh ray of ceremony and order. And it has been prophesied that by 2025, and that's just around the corner, that there would be millions of souls who would have taken the first initiation. Now that prophecy was made in the early stages or before the Second World War, and unfortunately hasn't really come to pass. For a whole variety of reasons, humanity are behind the eight ball in terms of growing our collective spiritual light. So this task is still ahead of us, and we have a great deal of work to do to bring light into the world and light into organisations and light to reveal shadow and darkness that is everywhere in this world that we live in here in the 21st century. When we do get millions who have taken the first initiation, then this will be known as the collective new birth for humanity. Yes, another way of describing this first initiation is the birth initiation. So the goal for those with strong Leo who are on the spiritual path is to recognise their selfishness and find ways of putting it behind them and striving to become more selfless. And striving to become selfless is a way that the mind begins to transmute the physical body. We have to strive to lift the desire for something that we want on a selfish level to an aspiration for something that benefits others, benefits the good of the whole. We have to strive to learn something about love beyond the personal, beyond the familial, into the universal through the unconditional nature of love. And love is often a great teacher when one has strong Leo in the natal chart. Similarly, we're striving to understand and communicate the language of the soul, which is intuition. Yes, there are a couple of symbols associated with Leo. We think of course immediately of the lion, and the lion has its ancient esoteric roots way back in Egypt through the lioness goddess Sekhmet, and Sekhmet was the sister of Bast. Yeah? And then I come to think also of the Sphinx. And the mythology associated with Sekhmet was that she was worshipped as a goddess of the earth, or a feminine goddess who held the matriarchal lineage. Yes, and of course, and she was known as the Lady of Flame, Sekhmet. And if you look, you'll see that the lion, the royal lion that's come all the way initially from ancient Egypt as a feminine, matriarchal goddess of the earth, has transmogrified into, the lion that you see on the crest of the United Kingdom's flag, and it's come all the way through the Greek and through the Roman and into modern use here in the 21st century. So the lion, and we often hear or think about people being lion-hearted, has a lot to do with courage. Another very strong symbol that's not so much associated with Leo, but is very strongly associated with this first great breakthrough of soul awareness, this first initiation, is bread. And bread simply stands for sharing. Whatever it is that we have, particularly around food, let us share it. So I'll turn now to discussing the constellation of Leo. And the brightest star in the constellation of Leo is the fixed star Regulus that is found in the 29th degree of Leo, also known as the heart of the lion. Now, Regulus is interesting because it is one of the 4 royal stars, and the royal stars were revered particularly through the Arabic astrology a few thousand years ago. And at that time, and still to this day, Raphael has a connection of guardianship to the direction of east. That's Archangel Raphael. Archangel Michael has a position, if you like, associated with the south. Archangel Gabriel, and of course also the lady archangels. So when I say, Gabriel to the west and Uriel to the north. So the archangels hold what we call the cardinal points, the male and the female archangels. Yes, now Raphael, the archangel of Raphael, is intrinsically connected to the fixed star Regulus and therefore to the direction of east. Known in the Christian tradition as God's glory, from the esoteric tradition, Archangel Raphael is an archangel associated with healing, whilst Michael is associated with protection, and Gabriel is associated with grace, and Uriel is associated with the earth. There are certain constellations that are significant in within Leo, and one of them is the sickle constellation. Astrologically, the fixed star Regulus from this 29th degree, the last degree of Leo, has a great deal to do with royalty or nobility and is considered to be a Mars-Jupiter star. So if an individual or a nation or a leader has this fixed star prominent, then you would expect and you would hope that there would be some royalty or some nobility. However, of course, this depends upon the soul development of the individual or the nation concerned. Yes. Great amount to do with royalty and to do with leadership. The period, the second half of August, from the 18th through to the 30th of August, is a very significant time, at which time the fixed star Regulus rises across the horizon, and conversely 6 months after that or before that, between the 14th and the 26th of February, is also a very significant time for the fixed star Regulus as it sets. Yes, so it might be useful to pay attention to events that occur, particularly around leaders or leadership, between the 18th and the 30th of August this year, 2020, to see if we can see how well the leaders of the world are doing in leading or not their nations, their individuals towards this path of light, this path of the heart, this birth initiation that we're approaching. Conversely, if a leader fails to live up to the soul's aspirations that are indicated via Regulus, which is nobility, not for themselves but for the good of the whole, then the Achilles heel kicks in, and sometimes we will see those leaders take actions of great revenge. And from there, if leaders or individuals take actions of great revenge when they feel they've been slighted, then they fall from grace. So we could pay attention to see where are the national leaders who represent this energy, who lift us to nobility. So the question with the sickle, the vivid group of stars, is who is ruling and who is the king? Is it the ego that is in charge, or is it the soul? And which law do they follow? Are they following a law unto themselves? Are they following and adhering to the rule of law in societies? Are we following the laws of nature? Are we respecting spiritual law? Because the sickle has a great deal to do with the cutting out and cutting away of all that is obstructing the natural law and the spiritual law. All things that hinder the flowering of the soul have to be cut away. Yes, there are 3 constellations. It's the Persian astrologers from thousands of years ago who've identified the particular symbolic constellations, and they speak about the cup of suffering, and the serpent of illusion, and the bird of prey. And all three of these are part and parcel of the constellation of Leo. So I'll talk briefly about those. So Hydra the serpent, and I immediately have an association there with the sign of Scorpio. And of course there is an esoteric connection between the tests and challenges of coming from the heart for the good of others with true spiritual nobility in Leo, and further tests and progresses along the spiritual path as we get to the sign of Scorpio. But Hydra, the serpent, covers the sign of Cancer, the sign of Leo, and the sign of Virgo over 100 degrees, a very large constellation. The serpent initially is a serpent of illusion that we're going to take some time, some lifetimes, to break through illusion, hopefully by the time we get to the sign of Scorpio. And Hydra represents the material world that is veiling or hiding or shielding the spiritual worlds and light from us, and we have to break through it. When I say illusion, I'm speaking about our prejudices and our belief systems where we think we're right and we shut down the options to other possibilities. We simply cannot see what is right in front of us. And that's part of the tests of Hydra the serpent. Now, the other part of the body of the Hydra is Crater the cup. And this represents the spiritual test of who drinks. Do we serve ourselves first or do we serve others? And is the service to others to alleviate suffering, or are we doing it for some kind of personal gain? This is the test associated with Leo. Corvus the raven stands upon the back of Hydra, the serpent, and pecks the serpent. And the raven is often associated with the personality and with the material world. There are 9 stars within the Corvus constellation. And Corvus is known as the bird of prey or the bird of matter. Yes. And I suppose you could say that there's a certain amount of self-destructiveness associated with Corvus the raven pecking the serpent. And similarly, our ego can get involved in very self-destructive behaviour. Okay. Now, in the Egyptian mythologies and the teachings, the ancient Egyptian teachings, Leo and these 3 attendant constellations are all seen as one great sign. So now astrologically we speak about the constellation of Leo as that portion of the heavens that is on the ecliptic, whereas the ancient Egyptians considered the constellations nearby, Corvus, Crater and Hydra. Yes, and from their perspective, Leo the lion represented the courage of the soul, and the lion-hearted is seen to tread on the serpent, who represents the ego. And Corvus the raven is seen to be perched on the lion's shoulder. And beneath the plumed female figure, and here's the energy of Leo holding this female figure. This is, remember I was talking about the Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess, who holds the matriarchal line, and she's a goddess of earth. She holds 2 cups. Okay, so the teachings around these constellations are to do with courage and nobility and to sharing and to giving with those who lack, and to for the soul, the best in us, to rise up above the tendency of the worst in us to look after ourselves and number 1 first. And I can't help but think about the current issue that has erupted all over the world since the Asala festival around the Black Lives Matter movement. And this is not just an American movement, it's become a global movement, because what we have there, to my mind, is a great amount of suffering and inequality. We have global systemic racism, and we have a lot of disruption of the laws of the land. There's a lot of revolt, there's a lot of people marching, there are some moves to anarchy. So we have an attempt, from my perspective, to redress an ancient wrong, i.e. racism, that's been on the planet for thousands of years. to bring about a balance with that and to share the benefits of society to all, not just to those who are white or privileged. Okay, I thought I might at this juncture just speak a little bit, and I won't go too much into it, into the natal charts of two individuals who are on the world stage at the moment. And what I'm going to do there is focus upon their charts very briefly and the sign of Leo to see indeed whether or not the light of the soul can be seen in either of these charts. And the first chart that I'm looking at is Donald Trump's chart, and as it turns out it's his birthday today. There's a bit of synchronicity going on. So Donald Trump was born in 1946. How old does that make him? I'm just working it out. He's 6 from 10, he's 74. Age 74, yes. Okay, all right, so in his natal chart, lo and behold, he has the planet Mars, which is associated with the ego and the warrior, in the sign of Leo, in the 27th degree of Leo. So extremely close to Regulus, the fixed star, the royal star associated with healing. So the question must be asked then, is he a national leader who's bringing about healing? Or is he bringing about division? Or is he, in fact, through his actions, revealing divisions which have always been there? I'll leave that for you to contemplate and decide. But I find it extremely interesting that Donald Trump has Mars conjunct Regulus. And not only that, he also has his ascendant in the 29th degree of Leo. So you could say he is a Regulus individual. Donald Trump has always reminded me of a Roman gladiator. He always seems to be speaking about how good he is and how tough he is and how many battles he's won, and, you know, his might leads to right. And I think recently he was basically saying, I am the law and I have all the National Guard under my command. And of course we know that's not true, and the issues of lawlessness have come up. So I would say that in the midst of the anarchy and the chaos and the upheaval and the pain and the suffering that is occurring in America, we have an opportunity for the soul light of America to shine forth. However, the question must also be asked, because he's a very prominent Regulus individual, is will he stoop to revenge? I don't know his life story to know whether he has stooped to revenge in the past, but one thing's for certain is that if he does stoop to revenge, if he believes that he is personally threatened, or his power is threatened, or his ability to command the law is threatened, if he stoops to revenge, then there will be a fall from grace. In his progress chart, he has Saturn in Leo. It's fallen in the 12th house, very karmic matters to do with the heart and love and leadership. He also has Pluto there, as many people of his generation, born in 1946. And by progression, he also has Mercury. They're all earlier in the sign of Leo. Okay, and bearing in mind that period in August, the last 2 weeks of August in every year, when the fixed star Regulus rises above the horizon, I'll be watching keenly to see what occurs in American politics and indeed in global politics in that fortnight. Okay, I won't say any more about that. I'll simply refer you to the Great Change Part 1, one of the talks that I did, which was focused upon America, and you'll find that on my website or my YouTube channel, where I talk more in depth about the change in America, and I think I might have done that talk about 3 or 4 months ago. The second chart that I would like to look at is the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Because I live in Australia, no doubt I could have picked any other national leaders. I'm sure that I haven't even looked at Boris Johnson's to see if he has Regulus strong. Now, Scott Morrison has Jupiter in Leo, interestingly, at the same degree that Donald Trump has Mars. So there's a natural sense of leadership. You could say a feeling of born to lead or born to rule or born to sort of stand out from the crowd. He has Jupiter in Leo, and he has very strong T-square in his chart, a square to his Sun and Vulcan, and a square to Neptune and the Moon. So his heart chakra and his Leo nature and the tests and the challenges between who is the ruler, is it his ego or is it his soul, they're alive and present in the life of Scott Morrison. It is the focal planet receiving the greatest conflict, the greatest pressure from his soul in his chart. People don't know what time he's born. I've postulated that he's born at 11:23 a.m. and that would give him 26 degrees Cancer rising. I've done that briefly using the age point method, looking at when he came to power and when his Saturn was in high focus. But I won't go further into that. He only has one planet in Leo, and it is Jupiter. So therefore he has a very prominent Regulus, and no doubt we will see it in action in the last 2 weeks of August. And certainly here in Australia, a lot of the stimulus packages for the survival of the nation are tipped to be running out between now and then. So let's see what happens. Okay, I'll continue on now with the sign of Leo, and I'm going to look at the tests, the spiritual tests on the path that were undertaken by Hercules, who's the spiritual aspirant who becomes the spiritual disciple. And the test that Hercules had in the labour number 5, as it's known, the spiritual test in the 5th sign of the zodiac, is the slaying of the Nemean lion. So there we see that theme of the lion that comes all the way through from ancient Egypt. And of course Hercules was from the Greek and the Roman traditions. Did I mention, I've probably forgotten to mention, that the period every year when we are having the training and the testing around the sign of Leo is from the 22nd of July through till the 21st of August, roughly speaking. Sometimes those dates are not quite right. If you'd like to know more about the labours of Hercules, I refer you to the book by Alice Bailey. Okay, so the myth, and what happens is that each of the signs has a particular test or a particular task. And the task that Hercules was given by his teacher, he was told that it was a dreadful labour and that he would require courage. and therefore he took with him into the task he was armed, all the weapons of war. Yeah? And he was told that he would hear a call of deep distress, and that the call was coming from the people of Nemean. I'm not sure where Nemean is, no doubt somewhere in Greece, and that they were seeking his aid. And the reason they were in distress and seeking his aid was that there was a lion that was prowling and devastating the lands and taking a toll upon all life. An absolute devastation of livelihood and life, and he was told that he had to go and seek the lion which was ravaging the land on the far side of the 5th gate. That's the sign of Leo. And he was told that the people were quaking and had retreated and were silently withdrawing to live behind locked doors. Now, when I was rereading this myth, I thought, how very interesting. We have a pandemic, a virus. Maybe you might think of it as an invisible lion that's been raging abroad, and people have withdrawn from the terror and have been sheltering in place and sheltering behind locked doors. So there's some sort of parallel going on here in 2020 with the labour of Leo and what was happening to the people of Nemean. So from north to south and east to west, the lion prowled, literally in all directions, and was seizing and killing all those who crossed his path. And Hercules was called to respond. And so he decided that of all his weapons, the one that he would take was his club, the club that he had cut by his own hands. And he let the people of Nemean know that he was there to support them, and that they should not fear and they should not be unafraid because they were not alone. And I also find that interesting, because what happens when we are being ravaged by our own ego, maybe not a virus, but by our own ego, by our own thoughts or our mind or our selfishness, we are often visited and reminded by those from the invisible spiritual realms that we are not alone. The angels will come to us. So Hercules has that saviour kind of energy. Anyway, several days and nights go past, and he's hunting amongst all the trees, and he gets sight of the lion. Think of the lion. Here, this is the lower lion rather than the higher vibration lion, the ego. And he tries shooting at it with some arrows that he's got. And then he throws the bow away, and he just decides he'll pursue it. Yeah? And it disappears around the back of a rocky thicket at the base of a mountain. So searching and searching, this is what we have to do. Our ego's visible, and it's been attacking and creating harm, and we have to pursue it, and then it disappears, and suddenly Hercules comes upon a cave. So he enters the cave. Now this sort of sounds kind of biblical to me. You know, was it Daniel who entered into the cave and had to sleep a night with the lion in the cave? I can't remember the story, but I do remember that he comes out unharmed. So Daniel in the lion's den and Hercules going into the den of the cave, same myth. Yeah? And then he decides, well, how will I catch this lion? It takes great courage to face one's ego, face oneself, not run away from it. Then he decides he's going to have to corner the ego, so he blocks the cave off with two large rocks at either entrance. And then with both of his hands, he kills the lion. The lion, now we don't know how this happens. Is it just his strength? Is it his courage? Is it his fearlessness? We know that the lion's roaring with hatred, but eventually the lion gets weaker and weaker. Yeah? The interesting thing about this task is this is the first of the tasks where nobody sees it. The overcoming of the lion, of the ego, is done in the cave. It's done on an invisible level. And as a result of this, he's delivered the people of Nemean from the terror. So we say, okay, well, we have an external lion raging, we have a pandemic, we have the injustices and the cruelty and the suffering that's been revealed, Black Lives Matter and so many, many other people who've suffered during this time. We look for a saviour. The saviour has to come through courage. We have to fight our own demons to be able to strengthen the hand of others and to assist others who are suffering. The task will be invisible to others and yet requires great courage within ourselves. Yeah. Weapons really are of no effect. The club is not useful, the bow and arrow is not useful. It's weapons that we have developed within ourselves, our capacity for light, for integrity, for honesty, for truth, for service to a greater cause. These are the things we have to draw upon that we have developed with our own hands. Interestingly, Leo, the fifth sign of the zodiac, number 5 has a great deal to do with the spiritual realms. The fifth card of the major arcana in the tarot represents the holy ones, and so does the number 5. It's the finding of our own holiness. And you could say it is the last of the tests on the probationary path, and the result of the Leo labour is this birthing of the Christ child, that's one's soul and spirit, within the cave, that is in the heart chakra of one's own heart. Yes. Okay, I'm just wondering if there's anything else to say to you about this labour. Well, because of the constellations of Hydra, the serpent, you know, our own delusions, our own fixed beliefs, our own prejudices, yeah? we need to move beyond those. We need to find the cup, which is generosity and service, and give it to others. And we need to be very mindful of our own tendencies for self-destruction. Yes, Leo, Hercules in this task is seen as the warrior or the saviour. And similarly, the sign of Leo, the best of the sign of Leo, is that we can rise to that noble qualities of the soul, to rule for the good of others, to be there for the good of others. Leo represents this coordinated personality that is in the process of being infused by the light of the soul. Yes, so some people with Leo prominent have very aggressive, confident, self-satisfied personalities, and they are literally devastating the lands, or devastating a family, or devastating a business, or a nation, or a community, whilst others with Leo have refined and brought the light of the soul in and have tamed their personal selves and stopped it from running amok in the world. So you could say that the battle between the light of the soul and the strong, coordinated, dominant personality always takes place in the sign of Leo. This is the first great battle that leads us to the first great portal, or the first great gate, that of the first initiation, the birth of the Christ within the cave of the heart. So I think that's all I'll say about the sign of Leo and the spiritual tests associated with Leo. If you're interested in more to do with America, then I refer you to that Great Change Part 1, USA. If you're interested in Scott Morrison's role within Australia, I refer you to the talk, The Great Change Part 1, Australia. If you're interested in the Great Change broadly speaking, then I refer you to the Eclipse talk, Call from the Mountains. And of course you may well, if you haven't already, go back and review some of the earlier teachings around the signs of the zodiac. I started with Taurus. Don't know why I didn't get it together to start with Aries, so I won't get there until next year. And I'm going through the zodiac. So far I've done Taurus and Gemini and Cancer and Leo. This is the 5th test. Okay, this has been Chandra Easton from Star Astrology Healing. Nice to connect with you again. Bye for now.